President, please be seated. The court is now in session. Today, the chamber continues to hear the remaining testimony of witness Su Seun. And before the chamber hands the floor to the defense teams, the chamber first hands the floor to the defense counsel for Noon Chea to make an oral submission regarding the document submitted by the co-prosecutor yesterday, as well as the appeal brief against the judgment in case 002/01. And before I hand the floor to the defense counsel for Noon Chea, Mr. M. Hoy, please report the attendance of the parties and other individuals at today's proceedings. Gracias, Mr. President. For today's proceedings, all parties to this case are present. Mr. Noon Chea is present in the holding cell downstairs. He has waived his rights to be present in the courtroom. His waiver has been delivered through the greffier. The witness who is to conclude her testimony today, that is Madame Su Seun, is present and ready in the courtroom. Thank you. President, thank you. The chamber now decides on the request by Noon Chea. The chamber has received a waiver from Noon Chea dated 5th June 2015, which notes that due to health condition, that is backache and headache, he cannot sit or concentrate for long, and in order to concentrate to participate effectively in the future hearings, he requests to waive his direct presence on the 5th June 2015 hearing. He advises that he has been advised by his counsel that in no way the waiver can be construed as a waiver of his rights to be tried fairly or to challenge evidence presented or admitted at any time during his trial. Having seen the medical report of Noon Chea by the duty doctor for the accused at the ECCC dated 5 June 2015, who notes that Noon Chea has chronic back pain and headache and cannot sit for long, and recommends that the chamber shall grant him his request so that he can follow the proceeding from the holding cell downstairs remotely. Based on the above information and pursuant to Rule 81.5 of the ECCC internal rules, the chamber grants Noon Chea his request to follow the proceedings remotely from a holding cell downstairs via and audio-visual means. The AV unit personnel are instructed to link the proceedings to the room downstairs so that Noon Chea can follow it remotely. That applies for the whole day. The chamber also would like to inform the parties that for today's proceeding and questioning the civil party, Judge Yu Uttara, who is a national judge, is absent due to personal matters. And after having deliberated amongst the judges of the trial chamber, Judge Tumani is appointed to replace Judge Yu Uttara today. And that decision is based on Rule 70 9.4 of the ECCC internal rules. The Chamber now hands the floor to Defense Counsel Copper to make his oral submission in relation to your request yesterday concerning the process of document submission as well as matters related to the appeal brief of the judgment in case 002/01. And Counsel, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors. Good morning, Counsel. Yes, the day before yesterday, we were notified by the International Co-Prosecutor of another disclosure of new statements coming from Case 3. For background purposes, it might be worthwhile to remind the Chamber that up until now we have received 436 written records of interviews from Cases 3 and 4, numbering up to 6,397 pages in English. These were all disclosed in the last 5 or 6 months. And when we were notified of new documents coming from Case 3, another 1,000 pages coming from 89 written records of investigations will be added to our case file, bringing a total, I think, new pages about 7,400 total. So again, we are confronted with a huge amount of new evidence arising from Cases 3 and 4. As of yet, we have not received any of those statements itself. We only have an overview of what is coming soon to us. When we had a look at this brief overview, we noticed that at least 2 written records of interviews were related to the Kampong Chhnang airport. That is document E319/23.3.1. It's a written record of a civil party from 6 April 2012. And we also saw a document which is called E319/23.3.57, a written record of an interview of a witness from 22 May 2014, also relating to the Kampong Chhnang airport construction site. In addition, we noticed that almost all new WRIs are related to purges in the East Zone. And as is referenced in the closing order, soldiers working at the Kampong Chhnang airport were mostly coming from East Zone troops, revolutionary troops in the East Zone. So it seems that these new WRIs might be very relevant to Kampong Chhnang airport as well. In addition, some of them seem to be speaking about military structure within the Revolutionary Army of Kampuchea. So also for this reason, these 89 documents that have now been disclosed and that we will soon read seem to be very relevant for Kampong Chhnang airport. Now, of course, as in earlier instances, this raises the question whether we are in fact ready to start hearing evidence on Kampong Chhnang airport. I'd be very happy to hear from the prosecutor if our concerns are valid, and that a lot of new evidence coming from cases 3 and 4 have direct impact on the Kampong Chhnang Airport worksite. In any case, at this point, we have just been notified that these disclosures are coming, but we haven't actually received it. And I think it would be in the interest of all parties, including the bench, to be able to have at least a prima facie look at these documents before we start Monday hearing the first witness in relation to the Kampong Chhnang Airport. As of now, I don't address the question whether it is even physically possible to read 1,000 pages in the next 48 hours before we start. I won't touch that subject right now. I'm just waiting for making any submissions when we hear from the prosecution as to the relevance of these new documents for Kampong Chhnang Airport. There's all kinds of new questions arising from this latest disclosure, and I would like to have answers from the prosecution as to the relevance of these documents. That's my first point. My second point is the scheduling of the Kampong Chhnang Airport site witnesses. We have noticed that it is anticipated to have about 8.5 working days of testimony. We might also have this month some additional witnesses coming back to testify in relation to the 1st January dam worksite. However, a few days might be left over before we are entering into the summer recess. But I'm sure the trial chamber is aware that 2 weeks of the judicial recess have been taken by the Supreme Court chamber, and in its recent decision it has announced that it will summons 3 witnesses to appear before the Supreme Court chamber. As you might understand, the defense needs to prepare these 3 witnesses well. These are 3 witnesses that we have requested. I want to make sure that if there are a few remaining days left in the last week of June, we will not start addressing the Traping Tma Dam before the recess, and that we will be granted a few days extra in order to enable us to prepare our the testimony that is coming at the Supreme Court chamber. So the second question is related to sort of planning from the trial chamber in respect of the last week of June. And I would like to make this point now rather than wait until the very last moment. So these are the 2 issues, very problematic situation with new disclosures, and what are we going to do in the last week of June in terms of moving on to a possible next work site. These are my 2 points.
President and Defense Counsel for Kios Mbon, do you have the floor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Good morning to all of you. I think I should speak now before the International Co-Prosecutor reacts. Of course, in the same way as what happened when we had to speak about Krang Tachang and that there were a certain number of new documents, it is obvious that regardless of the information that the co-prosecutor will give to us, we cannot tell you exactly how much time we will need to study these documents because we haven't seen them. We only have anticipated summaries of these new statements. So we note, just like my colleague in the Nunchia team, that they're witnesses from Kampong Chhnang Airport, and there are at least 51 witnesses who will testify about purges, and that there are also important elements with regard to the composition of the army. And we know that, of course, all of this is a very important element for the Kampong Chhnang airport site. So under these conditions, therefore, it's obvious that starting the Kampong Chhnang airport segment without us having the possibility of reading the totality of these statements is going to be an issue for the preparation of our defense. So I'm awaiting the information that will be given to me by the International Co-Prosecutor. But as of now, if the segment is going to begin on Monday, since we do not have the documents before us, we indeed have a problem, a real problem in terms of organization. With regard to the second point, which is the preparation of the appeal hearings and what you have considered based on the eventual recall of witnesses for the end of the 1st January dam segment, our concerns are the same. We have to also be prepared for this. So I'm again awaiting information from the co-prosecutor with regard to Kampong Chhnang. But it's true that a few days of preparation for an important Supreme Court hearing seems to be the basic minimum so that we can provide a full and complete defense to Mr. Kyosampa.
President, the Chamber now hands the floor to the Deputy Co-Prosecutor. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Let me try to respond to the various issues that have been raised. In fact, there are only two of these new interviews that we have linked and identified as relevant to the Kampong Chhnang airport. This was not for reasons that, two reasons that are fairly obvious. This was not a site of extensive investigation in Case 3. First, because it had already been investigated as part of Case 2. And secondly, as was publicly announced yesterday, last year or the year before, the former secretary of Division 502, Sumet, passed away. And as a result, any investigation of his crime sites came to an end at that point. So of all the Case 3 and Case 4 interviews, and there are a total of about 900 that have been done, there are only 6 interviews that we linked as relevant to Kampong Chhnang Airport. 3 of those were disclosed back in 2011, 1 earlier this year, and the last 2 are being disclosed as part of this filing. As I've said before, our request, Mr. Kope made reference to one of these being an old interview. That is true. Our request to disclose this interview, however, was made more than a year ago. It was initially denied, and authorization only came a couple of weeks ago. So there's not much more we could have done. In addition to having requested disclosure a year ago, we identified these specifically as priority interviews for disclosure. We broke down our requests so that the judges were aware of which interviews related to which segments. I can't speak to, obviously, the reasons for the decisions made by the investigating judges. I can tell you, just from our interaction, they evaluate these on a case-by-case basis with the investigators to determine if there are particular concerns, whether there are witnesses identified who are being the subject of further interviews. Beyond that, I can't speak to the reasoning that goes behind this. What I can tell you is we immediately make requests for disclosure when we identify, and as soon as authorization is obtained, we do that. These 2 interviews, one of them is 6 pages long, the other is 10 pages long. They're very short interviews. the issue that counsel has raised about getting copies. We've converted, my understanding is, to an electronic process. That makes it easier in terms of hours of work time of not having to copy, but apparently it takes a couple of days for the documents to make its way through the electronic system. So what I will do is when I sit down here after and we start the witness, I will send an email to my office to see if we can get hard copies of the 2 interviews that relate to Kampong Chhnang so that they can be immediately provided to the parties in the chamber. The issue relating to the East Zone, the East Zone was not a subject of investigation in Case 3. It doesn't mean there's not some tangential information in there. That's certainly possible. That's about all I can tell you, is that the East Zone was not the subject. The main subject of investigation, which is public knowledge, was Division 164, the Navy operation. And that is obviously not to say that there is not going to be military structure information in there. That's certainly true. I don't expect that is different types of information, particularly in relation to Kampong Chhnang, than what is already exists. The request relating to the Supreme Court chamber, I don't think we have any issue with the suggestion that we do not start Trapeang Tama if we finish Kampong Chhnang early. I think that's a reasonable proposal. I don't think the amount of preparation time needed for these 3 witnesses is very extensive. One of them, without getting into identity, one of them is a person the defense have regularly used as interview here. So these are not people that the defense are not already familiar with. But I think that's a reasonable suggestion, that should we finish Kampong Chhnang a couple of days early, that we wait until after the break to start Trapeang Tama. I think that's as much as I can say in response to the defense issues. If you have any questions, I'm happy to do my best.
Just 2 questions. Do you have any idea when the documents of the current disclosure will now actually really hit the case file? I understand you will try to speed it up, but are we talking 3 or 4 days or 3 or 4 weeks, or?
I'm not involved in those logistics, but I asked. My understanding is that there's a 2-step process in terms of them getting, and they'll be available in one folder, I'm told, on Monday. They'll be available in Xylab on Tuesday, is what I was told. But like I said, with respect to the 2 that relate to Kampong Chhnang, I will immediately see if we can get those hard copies of those delivered before then.
And my second question is, just in case you know, is there another disclosure in the pipe that will hit the case file, let's say, until the recess, as far as you know?
I haven't been involved in this because I've been working on witnesses and other matters. I understand that there is another disclosure that's been authorized. It relates to Case 4 interviews, so I don't, my understanding is it wouldn't affect the current segment. The disclosure that has just taken place is a disclosure from Case 3, so because of that there were these 2 Kampong Chhnang airports, and there is, in general, a lot of information related to Division 164 in particular. But the additional disclosure, and I don't have the numbers for you, but I'll try to find that to see. I don't think it is a large disclosure, but please don't hold me to that. But there has been another one. It is Case 4 interviews, though, not Case 3. 。 . 。 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。 。 . 。
。 . 。 .
President, the international political lawyer for civil parties, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good morning to all of you. I wanted to provide the point of view of the civil parties and say again what I said at every discussion with regard to the revelation of the documents. We have a specific position because we support the prosecution, but we do so in an independent way, so we also need time to become aware of the documents, and we are exactly in the same position as the defense with regard to this point, because we only learned yesterday the divulgation of these documents, and we only became recently aware of the list of 89 documents. But on top of this is that the annexes are sent to the co-lead lawyers in a strictly confidential manner. So now I do not yet have the right to share this information with the lawyers who normally are there to help us in defending the interests of the civil parties. So we organized a common defense for Kampong Chlang, the civil party lawyers, as they are linked to the preparation of the witnesses. But today I am not able to share the information that is in this annex with the civil party lawyers. So it is necessary for us, therefore, to become aware of the documents before we start the Kampong Chlang segment. That's my first observation. My second observation regards regarding the proposal of my colleague to postpone Trapeang Tma if we can finish Kampong Chlang before the judicial recess. I have no problems with that. We, in fact, support this proposal.
President, the Chamber thanks all parties regarding the disclosure of new documents from cases 003 and 004. The Chamber will take into account all your observations so that it is fair for the defense to proceed with their representation of their clients and to have an expeditious trial proceedings.
May I just ask, Mr. Cooper, after what you heard from the prosecution, would you care to change or be more precise, as you actually said you would?
Yes, I'm very happy that you give me this opportunity. It's with great interest that I heard the submissions of the prosecution. He does not seem to reject our submission that within those other 87 statements there might be some very relevant information regarding military structure and regarding purchase of East Zone soldiers who then might have ended up in Kampong Chlang Airport. I don't see... we might get the two statements directly relevant to Kampong Chlang Airport, but I don't see us getting the other 87 statements. Having now realized this, I think the only reasonable and logical way to proceed is to give us at least 2 or 3 days next week to be able to study briefly those new 89 statements and to postpone the first witness at the Kampong Chlang Airport till Wednesday or Thursday. That seems to be the only reasonable way of proceeding. Otherwise, we just go on with the first witness without having any knowledge of these very new statements. Which brings me to a broader issue. I think it was the first time I heard that there are in total about 900 WRIs in cases 3 and 4. We are now having, with those new 89 statements, coming about 500 25 case 3 and 4 WRIs. That leaves about, if my calculation is correct, another 375 most likely coming our way. I see the prosecution not no. Well, I'm very happy with that, but at least part of that is likely coming our way. I know also that cases 3 and 4 have reached a new situation with the how's it called, the charging of the four suspects. So maybe it is also time for the international co-investigating judge to reevaluate his position and just stop being so cautious with giving us the testimony from cases 3 and 4. And the summer recess might be a natural moment to provide us with all remaining cases 3 and 4 statements, because we'll end up having this discussion every single time we're having a new disclosure, and it's getting quite tiring and almost impossible to have a proper defense for our client.
Encore une fois, pour
once more, in order to be logical, I think we should just make our additional remarks, and we wish to just point out that if I understood the co-prosecutor clearly, perhaps he can correct me if I'm wrong, we will have the possibility of consulting all the documents as of Tuesday, if they will be available on Xylab on Tuesday. If I understood him correctly, we need at least 2 or 3 days, and in that case, I do not see how we can start the Canton Chnam segment next Monday. I would say that it's very complicated for us to talk about documents that we haven't been able to study. Although we have only 2 statements that focus on Kampong Chhnam Airport and the other documents are not relevant, so for witnesses who are testifying on Kampong Chhnam, we have only 2 documents specifically, and the other documents are related to military matters and purges. Those documents are not relevant to us, the defense. The co-prosecutor's position could be that, the more so as they have more information than us who do not have the documents now. So this is a remark I wanted to make, that although other documents may not be relevant to the prosecutors, they may be relevant to us, the defense.
Let me be brief. I want it to be perfectly clear. If there were interviews of soldiers from the East Zone who had been purged and taken to Kampong Chhnang, they would be linked to that crime site. So the suggestion that because there may be other documents out there that relate to purges, that this has to relate to Kampong Chhnang is simply incorrect. I'm not going to dispute that these interviews relate to military structure. Of course they do. But as I said, the focus of these interviews is on Division 164. So it's your evaluation of the situation here. In terms of the comment about there being the possibility of a lot of additional disclosures, let me make sure that I'm clear. There have been approximately 900 interviews. In terms of the ones that have not been disclosed, the bulk of them have been evaluated and determined to be not relevant. There are continuing interviews, of course. The pace has normally been about 30 a month that we evaluate. So there will be more interviews as the investigations continue. But in terms of the documents that the interviews that have already been conducted, and I will check the numbers on this too. but I believe with this last disclosure, most of the interviews that we have requested to be disclosed have now been authorized. This last large group was from case 3. Again, I'm making a somewhat of an educated guess here because I'm not from the co-investigating judge's offices, but there is definitely a connection to the charging that occurred and then the subsequent decision that it was appropriate to release those interviews. One of the reasons that my understanding that there had not been disclosure of case 3 interviews before that was because of particular concerns related to the ongoing investigation of that division. So to the extent that is helpful, we have done our best to identify the ones related to Kampong Chhnang. The other interviews really do, for the most part, focus on Division 164. That is not to say that there won't be maybe some general information related to military structure. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that that's not possible.
So we conclude the round of discussion on the matter now, and I would like to give the floor to Judge Lavenge to put questions to this witness. You may now proceed.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Madam Witness. I still have 2 questions to put to you. Yesterday, you stated that while you were a member of the Chamka Le District Committee, you gave birth to a child, and that following the birth of that child, you were less involved in the affairs of the district. Can you tell us, Madam, whether you recall the date on which that child was born?
Yeah.
Answer. My youngest child, he was born in the year of a snake, and he had been sick at that time.
Et donc, c'est à partir...
So it was after your youngest child was born that you stopped involving yourself significantly in the affairs of the district? Is that your testimony?
Yeah.
Answer. Yes. After I delivered that baby, I became ill, so I was not working regularly in the district and in the base area. So I delegate my tasks to other chiefs. I stopped working for a period of 2 years, perhaps in 1977 and 1978. And in 1979, we parted each other.
Qui était, selon vous,
According to you, who was the head of the Chamka-Le district?
Answer. From my recollection, Taban was the chief. I remembered that he was the chief because we were close we were close and we were living nearby. And I do not know about others' cadres because we were separated after 1979.
Quand vous dites que vous...
When you state that you stopped taking part in the activities of the district committee, did you stop getting involved in all activities, or you only reduced your activities? And it appears to me that the construction of the first January dam occurred particularly in the year 1977. So, did you go to the first January dam work site after the birth of your child?
Yeah.
Answer. I went to that place for the visits. I went there to visit my family, and I did not go to the 1st January dam sites. And when there was a meeting among district members, I would be told what tasks which needed to be done.
Et quelles étaient ces tâches? Est-ce que vous pouvez être un peu plus précis?
And what were those tasks? Can you be a little more specific, madam?
Answer. After I stopped working for a short period of time and I delegated my tasks to others, I was living at home and I was helping the kitchen. And the tasks involving in the district were delegated to those in the districts. And about the tasks that I was told of, they considered me a senior. I mean, the district members considered me a senior, so I was only informed and reported on those tasks.
Et donc, quand on vous faisait rapport, on vous disait...
And when reports were sent to you, did they tell you that everything was okay, that everything went well, and that there was no problem?
Yeah.
Answer. They told me about those tasks, and I was told that cooperatives were organized properly. And I was not involved regularly in tasks. After that time, I was only in the kitchen. I was told that the livelihood in the cooperative was decent, was good. I was not involved in the instructing the district committee how to deal with people in the cooperatives. The sector and the district told me to take a rest during that period.
Dans vos déclarations, madame...
In your statements, madam, you stated that your functions in the district committee consists of two tasks. The first was to lead the people in the cooperative in order that they could build dikes and dig canals. You also stated that your role was to re-educate the inhabitants. This is what you stated when you were heard by the co-investigating judges, document 5294 ERN in French 00367812, Khmer ERN 00348835, and English ERN. I will try to identify it. I don't have it immediately before me. I'll give it later. Let me also point out that the following questions was put to you. What does education mean? And you said the following: after attending a meeting at the district level regarding the implementation of a plan, the directive, I gave instructions regarding the plans adopted by the country. Another question was as follows: what did you do in the case of persons who didn't follow your advice? And you said when they didn't follow our advice, we would educate them once or twice. And if they continued not to comply with our advice, the district would take necessary measures. I do not know where they were taken to. So my first question is as follows: do you confirm that education and re-education were part of your duties, madam?
Yeah.
Answer. Before I delivered the baby, I was working regularly with people, and for educating people, the district would be in charge of educating people. The district would take people to anywhere it's wanted, but I have no idea.
Qu'est-ce que vous voulez dire, madame, par le...
What did you mean when you said that the district took the people wherever it wished to? What did you mean by that?
Answer. I am not sure on this particular matter. Songkat would be the one who made the report that one individual had been reprimanded and advised, but that individual did not deter. So the district had the rights to remove that individual. It depended on the district. I have no idea. I did not have any idea at that time.
Est-ce que vous savez si pour...
Do you know whether, in order to take such a decision, the district took into account the biography of the persons concerned?
Answer. I cannot recall it because it has been so long since that time. I may have recalled some, and my memory perhaps is not 100% correct. And sometimes I am confused, and perhaps I may have given wrong responses. I have a weak memory, as I stated. I do not recall well.
Selon votre mémoire,
to the best of your recollection, do you know how former soldiers or former civilians who had worked during the Lon Nol regime were viewed?
comment ces personnes étaient-elles?
How were those people viewed?
រឿងរបប
Answer. I do not know about Lunol regime. I did not know how soldiers were considered. It's far beyond my understanding. I do not know.
Madame, je note.
Madam, I note that today and yesterday you requested the assistance of the TPO organization. This organization, as a general rule, is supposed to assist persons who are victims of trauma, psychological trauma, and to provide them with some counseling. May I know whether you are suffering from any psychological trauma, and if it affects your ability to talk about what happened during that period, and does talking about such matters constitute a source of suffering for you, and if so, why?
Answer. I feel traumatized during that period. Everyone was in trauma. Everyone was terrified.
Vous dites, Madame, tout le monde était
Madam, you have just stated that everyone was terrorized. What terrorized you? Who terrorized you, and why were you terrorized? Why did you feel terrorized?
ចាខ្ញុំខ្លាចមែនទែន
Answer. I was terrified of aerial bombings. Family parted each other. Parents were separated from children. When we noticed the presence of the bombers, we were afraid of those bombers. We would collect our children and flee. So I was terrified because of this.
Madame, aujourd'hui.
Madam, today and yesterday we did not mention bombings even once. Are you afraid of saying things or doing things that would not have pleased Ankara?
Answer. I have no such impression such as that. I'm not afraid of the president. I am telling the truth. I was terrified and afraid in that period because of the bombings, and we would be killed by those aerial bombings. And as I said, I am not afraid of the president here. I was afraid of the bombings and the gunshots. So I am telling the truth. I am telling what I have remembered.
Madame, est-ce que vous.
Madam, are you afraid of asking questions? Yesterday you stated that under the Democratic Cambodia regime, each person had to attend to their own business. So, are you afraid of asking questions?
Answer. I do not really understand this question. You stated that whether I am afraid to talk. Actually, I am only telling the truth. Why I recalled my terrors because of aerial bombing, because it was the reality at that time. Parents were separated from children because of aerial bombing. We experienced gunfire, we experienced bombing. So I am only telling the truth, and I will not tell anything which I do not recall it.
Y a-t-il eu des bombardements?
Were there any bombings after the 17th of April 1975?
Answer. On the 17th April, there were only the rockets flying everywhere, and we ran away from our homes when the Vietnamese came into the country, said the witness.
Vous êtes sûr?
Are you sure it was 17 April 1975?
Answer. In 1979, we went away to avoid the rockets. And there were 2 times I had to flee my homes. Once it was during the coup d'etat time, and another time was the period of the Vietnamese coming into the country. That was in 1979 when there were rockets flying everywhere.
When people would disappear, when the cadres around you would disappear, when base people would disappear, when the people in the cooperatives would disappear, did you ask any questions about that?
Avez-vous?
Did you dare ask any questions about that, or were you afraid to ask questions?
On the issue of disappearance, if the task was assigned or the responsibility was assigned to someone else, I did not have any involvement or authority, and the authority solely lied at the district.
And this left you completely indifferent to know that people would disappear, people who were under your orders. Didn't you try to know what had happened to these people? This didn't matter to you?
Of course, it mattered to me, but my authority was limited. And I did not have any authority to question the district. And I was mindful of my personal affairs. I was concerned about my life. For that reason, I didn't ask anything.
Madam, worrying about your life, taking care of your own business, would you call that cowardice? Or would you call that the perfect line of conduct you were supposed to abide by?
When I did not have the authority, I had to think of my life as an ordinary woman, and I had to live amongst the villagers. And as I said, I had no authority to question them.
According to you, did something not work well in democratic Kampuchea? And if that is the case, what didn't work well in democratic Kampuchea?
Personally, from my experience, I do not know how to respond to your question. Of course, we did not have the right to defend ourselves or to question the authority. And that is my best recollection of what happened at the time.
Bien,
Fine, I have no further questions, but before I give the floor to the other parties, I would like to ask for a bit of clarification from the prosecutors. Mr. Lysak, you said that it might be possible to provide to the parties copies, paper copies of the 2 written records of interview that are connected to the Kompong Shnang airport. Can you confirm if it is indeed possible to provide these photocopies today?
Judge Lewin, I'll have to give you an answer, I think, after the break. I'm checking my email to see if I've received a response to the email I've sent, but I don't see anything. I'm getting a spinning wheel right now, so if I can answer your question after the break, I'll see if I can find out.
merci.
Thank you. I have no further questions, Mr. President.
Mr. President, it is now convenient to take a break. We will take a break and resume at 20 past 10. Court officer, please assist the witness during the break and invite her as well as the TPO staff into the courtroom at 20 past 10. The court is now in recess.